Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Matt Topper of ConnectWise. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here.
We are 2 weeks as of when this goes live. We will be exactly 2 weeks from ITN Secure, and I thought we should have a little chat about what some of the knowledge transfer will look like at Secure, and sort of this initiative that you were a part of, coming to build out. The creative minds at ConnectWise got together, I'm sure, but tell me a little bit about this idea around having GTIA and Tech Degenerates bring content over a 2-day period at ITN Secure. What's behind that?
Yeah. So I'll take credit for the initial idea, but certainly there were a lot of people at ConnectWise and IT Nation that helped get this off the ground and moving, for sure. What we're looking to do with this is there are so many valuable community pieces in our industry. There are groups, there are even Facebook groups, some formal organizations, you name it, right? There's even, Signal groups,
Discord,
right? Everything. Yeah. And throughout all of these groups, there are people that have a lot of really useful, interesting, noteworthy, and valuable things to say that don't necessarily have a place to say it, right? If you think about what content...
B-sides.
Yes, it is kind of like B-sides. So think about what content looks like at most channel events. They're formal presentations. They're sometimes associated with a vendor. There's sometimes you have to be a big name. And I thought that it would be great to have a place for all of these useful and cool conversations I see happening every single day, for some of them to essentially happen in public, right? To give a platform to some of the contributors, some of the individuals, some of the organizations to get their message out, and just for the sake of valuing the community, bettering the industry, right? We have attendees who are at these events to learn things, and what better way to learn than to kind of give them a window into some of the conversations that you and I are a part of all the time.
Right. Like a glimpse into that knowledge transfer that we often take for granted because we regularly spend time together doing exactly that, whether it's over a pint or it's a Teams call. Even if you're part of a advisory council, that group, when it meets, is constantly just transferring information that I don't know that there's any advisory group that I'm a part of where I don't come away with some sort of new nugget that I didn't have an hour and a half prior to that call, right? And suddenly, and granted, sometimes it sends me on that squirrel type scenario because I want to explore when I have other things to do. But to your point, Tech Degenerates doesn't have their own events. We see Tech Degenerates as a community at lots of different events, providing some sort of meet and greet, reception. They sponsor stuff.
Costumes.
Costumes. Yeah, absolutely. The Flow Rider was quite epic with the red Hawaiian shirts and the bucket hats. And then you have GTIA, where yes, we do have a couple events that we put on per year, but we're also more of we're broader than just community, right? Or at least we were much broader than community. And now that we're sort of narrowing that focus, it's something that Wayne and I talk about a lot, and that is, it's one thing to bring vendors and solution providers together at our events, but in my humble opinion, the real meaning of community is to go where people are, to go where people regularly are attending or having conversations. Because if we do that, we're saying we want to be a part of what they consider to be community and not try to force our own community on them. And so I'm excited to be a part of this. I've been involved, as you already know, with ConnectWise and IT Nation events for longer than, I mean, I started when I was 7. So over the last 20 years, I've been to, I think it's like 14 IT nations at this point
Ooh,
is what my count is at.
that's more than me.
Um, well, once upon a time I was an IT Nation overachiever. So if Janine Edwards is listening to this, she's probably nodding her head that is absolutely true. But let's talk a little bit about what the theme is for the 2 days in this community room. Can you describe for us the atmosphere that this room is supposed to have? Because I think that's a great place to start.
So I want to say one thing before we get to the atmosphere, and
Okay.
that is I insisted on changing the name. Community room sounds like where my grandma went to play like cards in her retirement home.
And bingo, yeah.
Yes. So we renamed it Community Cyber Lounge, and that gets to the overall feel and theme of this, right?
Right, and that's where the movie Beekeepers came from, because essentially we're all sitting around in this room stealing money from old people. Is that
Yeah.
no? Yeah.
Yeah, bring your mahjong tiles and you're ready
That's
to go
right.
to
That's
the
right.
community room.
We're gonna have a book club.
So we
So
renamed it Community Cyber Lounge though because
yeah,
it's kind of this informal lounge feel, right? So think like couches, beanbag chairs, that kind of thing. It's not necessarily just another breakout room with the theme
right,
of community. It's a place to have some informal discussions, have some conversations, exactly the kind of thing that we have in these communities, right? It's not like a formal
yeah,
meeting notes. You're not following Robert's rules. It's just a place to gather and talk about things. And one of the last thing that I want to talk about before we get to the next part is I want to mention editorial control. That's a big part of this. And I just want to be clear to anyone listening to this that the content in here is not curated, or this is the community has this space to put on the content they want. We didn't specify what had to go in here. We didn't specify a theme. We did ask to see it before it went live, and that's the extent of the editorial control, right? This is not
right,
ConnectWise dictating things. This is community. You guys put on what you think should be in here, and I think that's important to note.
right. Yeah, we had to redact the first round because we said these are all the ways in which you can switch away from Connect. No. That wouldn't have flown so well. So what's interesting though about this is there's 12 sessions or 12 sort of call outs, because we wanted to accommodate per your request, making sure that when the breakout sessions are happening, that the timing also works, so that when sessions break and there's time to network, that it's the same thing. I also discovered, as I think about the way this is structured, is that I remember most events I've gone to over the years, I get a lot from the hallway chats, right? We used to say the unstructured networking that happens in between, or you end up missing 2 sessions because you just stayed in the hallway and kept having that, knowledge transfer. This is kind of like that, but at some level structured, right? So there are 12 sessions, and they all obviously are themed around cybersecurity. But what's interesting is, you and I had a conversation a few weeks back about sessions that maybe it was pre-day workshops, that kind of thing. And you had mentioned, or maybe I did, the Trustmark mindset. You've started down this path with your cybersecurity peer group, using something like the Trustmark as a way to measure success, to baseline, to qualify how an MSP is maturing their cyber practice. How do they become resilient? And I think if I look at the 12 sessions that are in here, it's not just knowledge transfer of these are things that you should be doing. There's there's actionable takeaways if you participate in these sessions. So you're hearing from someone who's done this. You're hearing from someone who has put into practice a repeatable process in order to show resilience. And so, we start the whole thing off with the Trustmark and impact on MSPs. And then we go into day 2 and we start talking about navigating risk and how to do risk management. And I think there's an emerging theme overall that says, as an MSP, you need to have a strategy around risk management. It's subtle at first, but I think as you go into day two, it becomes a little bit heavier messaging to everybody that's there. You've been heavily involved in doing the risk management workshop with Wayne. You and I talk about this quite a bit. What's different about doing risk management with MSPs that you don't see or hear outside of our community?
So I think one of the big things, and similar to how Trustmark addresses it without going too deep into the nuances of Trustmark, is that if you look at enterprise risk management frameworks or even government provided ones, two things emerge. One is it's exceedingly complicated. We were talking before the show about how much effort it can be if you do a NIST style risk assessment, for example.
Sure.
Valuable though it may be, it takes 6 months. But the other thing is that the enterprise frameworks don't necessarily take into account the force multiplier effect of MSPs and the challenges that you run into in having to deal with not just your risk management. And of course, you have your upstream vendors like every organization has, but you also have your downstream clients and how
Sure.
your risk management practices ultimately impact their risk, even if they aren't aware of it. That's one huge difference in it. And I think you described it perfectly in talking about the practicality. So in that risk management session that Wayne and I have done and that you've done as well, it really gets into the how do you take all this advice, right? Every security presentation you see, every piece of advice says something like take a risk-based approach. Okay, how do I actually do that? And
Right.
This session really helps you figure out, okay, what does that actually mean? Like pen to paper, rubber road, pick your metaphor here. Like, how do you do that?
Well, you're also describing something that on the surface is not a tangible item, right? Like you don't say risk and say, Matt. I mean, yes, Matt can be a risk, but
It
it's
can
the
be.
risk itself. It's the risk itself, though, that is hard to qualify and quantify when you look at it from a what are we using as the metric or what are we mapping this to so that everybody's on the same page. And I think this is where we get to the heart of governance within an MSP. If collectively as an organization, I know what my risk appetite is and I know what my risk tolerance is, then everybody in my organization, assuming they understand those two things, can help us maintain the healthy appetite and live
Yeah.
within those boundaries and then take that to the clients, right? And I think you hear this a lot. Every time we have that call with the client, they're like, they might even avoid the call. They're just going to try and sell me something else.
Yeah.
And the reality is, it's not that it's an untrue statement. I think it's actually very true that a lot of those conversations, especially if they're quarterly or every 3 to 6 months, there's probably some sort of like storing up of licenses, new employees get added. Those all do factor into cost. But interestingly enough, when you start having conversations with your clients about what's important to them and the risks that they take on in their day-to-day operations, if you ask them to highlight, what is important to you, they're like, oh yeah, well, not a whole lot. We don't really have a lot to protect because we're just not a target and we're so small. And they give you
Oh,
this really long list of things that are excuses as to why they don't believe they have a whole lot of risk. But then you start asking questions like, how long can you be without payroll? Like,
mm-hmm.
what happens if your accounting software is unavailable for the next 30 days? Where's the data? And suddenly they start going, well, huh, those could be problematic. So we had some technical difficulties, and we were getting near the end of what we wanted to share with everybody who's listening about the 2 days of knowledge transfer and sharing. And so I think the last big one was, we talked a little bit about the theme. We talked about risk management and why that's kind of interwoven throughout the 2 days. I think the last thing to talk about is maybe if you can highlight, and I'll do the same, some of the goals that are tied to the future of communities and not just communities. I think that's gotten, I think that's a very saturated space. There's lots of communities that you can get involved in. What there's not a lot of is communities who share a passion for cybersecurity resilience, maturing your cybersecurity practice. So, talking through a little bit of that, I think that's what we can sort of wrap up and close out on.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, Chris, there are tons of communities out there. And all of them, I think, have some kind of cybersecurity angle. What we don't see
Right.
a lot of in these discussions is from a practical perspective, how can we actually help each other from tactical steps, right? What can we really do? And if you look through the agenda, you can see it on the event website. Many of the sessions, or at least some of them, talk about how can we actively help each other as a community. So you'll actually see the words "as a community" in a few of the session titles, and what that's
Right.
signaling is let's really talk about not just from a surface level, but from a what do we do today? What do we do when there's a significant threat? How do we share that either threat intel or actionable steps, or just help each other through some of this? And I think that is a type of session we don't see a lot of. We see a lot of
Yeah.
sessions about, hey, communities are awesome. Like here are reasons to join. And while I agree they're fantastic, let's talk about how to really make use of that. And I'm really looking forward to either participating or watching those sessions, right? I think that'll be some of the best bang for buck. Like, how do you get the most out of these? And from an idea perspective, for the people in the organizations, communities already, how do we make it better for everyone? I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to that part.
I think I think you're spot on. I think the biggest piece, and obviously you and I see some of this because of the circles that we are involved in from our job roles and just the people that we know. Not everybody is privy to the fact that there's a Discord, server out there for some of these conversations, or that CyberRise exists to help MSPs who are navigating, really choppy waters as it pertains to either going through something themselves or one of their clients that's tied, potentially to, at the minimum, it's a business disruption, right? And
Right.
then you have some of the other scenarios that we see, like, standing up a signal channel for an event. And I think one of my observations has been over the last, I'm going to say 6 months, is that we do a really good job of reaching out to our circle and connecting us at an event, or connecting a group of us at an event. What we don't do a great job is making available how to connect into that, because it's not a click. I would argue that some of these signal groups that we're a part of are anything but. It's more of like, I just word vomited phone numbers into Signal and an attempt to capture everybody that I know, right? Like an attempt to say only those of you that are my friends should be participating in this chat. And what's interesting about some of the Signal conversations that I've seen have been things like, who just got in? And, the
Yeah.
event starts tomorrow. Let's meet up for dinner, or let's have, meet in the hotel lobby bar and have a drink or something along those lines. And the reality is, we know that those unstructured conversations are where a large percentage of the information transfer happens. And if I were to summarize collectively what I hope to happen on that Tuesday, Wednesday, is that the implementation to become resilient in your own organization is not an experiment, that you come to these sessions and you learn from those who have already made the mistakes, who have already had to finally overcome their own excuses to actually do something, so that you don't have to use an excuse as to why you can't do it. The argument of things like, it costs too much, I don't have time. Yep, we all can say those things. The threat actors don't care. So we've got to stop talking about this from the perspective of woe is me, because woe is me does not stay in business.
Mic drop.
Any last
Nailed
thoughts?
it.
Any last thoughts?
No, you nailed it. The only thing I would add to that is also from a practical perspective, those signal groups for the event can help deal with things like, hey, anybody know what the Wi-Fi password is, and all that
Right.
other important conference
Right.
stuff.
Did anybody let you know that the only options are vegan? What are we gonna do?
Right.
I will say this. I think this is kind of an interesting, as we close this out, is the number of opportunities that we have that because of the tools that are available, we can have those conversations. I think that when I look at the space and someone says I can't afford it, I don't know how many times I've had someone tell me about an amazing tool that costs tens of thousands of dollars, and then you look closely and it says up to 200 seats, no cost. If you're
Yeah.
implementing this for your own MSP, there's probably a tool service or something that will help you solve for it and not have it break the bank.
Yeah. And this group is so on, like the community is so honest about stuff like that, because if there's a tool like you just mentioned, you'll hear about it. If it's a
Yep.
case where the $10,000 tool really is the right thing, you'll hear that too,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And I think that's what's really about community. I'll close with this. I had an MSP put a POAM item for the trust mark that had them doing some research for a tool, and they gave themselves a very long timeline to solve for this. And my knee-jerk reaction was, "What is wrong with you?" The reality is their approach to evaluating and making a decision around a tool, we should all be doing. The problem is in this particular instance, this isn't something that should have required that level of investment because the answers were obvious. I don't want to get into what it was tied to because I don't want to give away who it was, but like it could be something as simple as where are you putting your inventory? And
Yeah.
I love it when someone says, well, I need something more powerful than a spreadsheet. I'm like, why? If you can't give me a good explanation, then start with the spreadsheet and get it done, or as done as is reasonable for you to continue to move forward through whatever framework you're aligning to. So with that, I'll close it out. We had some technical difficulties this week, so there's going to be at least 8 to 9 minutes of silence that you have to listen to before you can get to the end nuggets of this. No. All right. For those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks and have a great week.